Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. My name is Rohan, and as usual, I've got Phil. Hey, Phil.
Hey, Rohan, how's it going?
Good. This episode has been sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabukasa. Easily access your local Home Assistant instance remotely for a monthly fee that supports the Home Assistant and ESP Home projects. Configuration is done by the user interface, so there's no fiddling with router settings, SSL certificates, or any YAML involved. All right, and we've got a special guest on today. Corey, how's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
Yeah, good. Where are you joining us from, Corey?
So I am in Idaho in the United States.
Nice.
Very nice. Very nice.
So welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. Obviously, I'm guessing you're a Home Assistant user.
Yep. I've been using Home Assistant. I started in 2017, so a little while now.
Nice.
2017, yeah, wow. So what would have been your first version, I'm guessing?
I want to say it was like 0.53
yeah.
or 5.1, somewhere around there.
Okay.
Yep.
I definitely remember it felt fairly mature. I mean, the version numbers don't always tell the whole story, right? But that was one of the things that drew me to it. Is like you could tell there was a lot of polish put into the project.
Yep.
Yeah.
Was it still 0.54 back then? I can't remember if they still
I think
the
so.
zero by then.
Yeah,
it's been so long.
It would have been.
so.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, so how did you, so you're obviously using Home Assistant today. So where did you start with home automation in general? And then how did that lead you to Home Assistant?
I feel like I started ages ago. So I'm an IT guy. I've been doing various system administration and whatever. I worked at internet service provider for a decade and learned all the things about monitoring our routers, modems, all that stuff, right? So you get used to this enterprise grade stuff, and then you come home and you use these cheap little Netlink routers at home, and you're just like so disappointed.
Yeah.
So I was familiar with how really fancy, expensive gear works. And there was one time the company president I don't know, he's got some kind of a crazy idea that he was going to get into managing SCADA systems. Those are the, I can remember what SCADA stands for. But those are the systems that manage like your street lights, controls all the street lights. Or in our case, it was wells. So we're near Wyoming, and there's a lot of oil and gas production in Wyoming. And so they use these SCADA systems to control the wells and the pumps and just all the different stuff. So he sent a bunch of us off to training to learn how to program SCADA systems. I don't know why. We never did anything with it, but I learned how they worked, and it was kind of fun to get really low level and be able to program individual pins and doing like what's the integrate the loop. Now I'm blanking on it. But we learned how to do a bunch of this like low level control. And so at some point I realized I could do this at home. There's enough of this stuff where I got into Arduino. My son was kind of interested in that. I bought him a little Arduino kit and we started programming with that. He lost interest real fast. And I was like, well, I'm going to get me one of these. So I bought me a little Arduino kit, and I just kept buying more little components. And I thought to myself, I could just build a home automation thing. And the first thing I built was a little relay board that connected to my fireplace. Because why wouldn't I play with gas and fire, right? As my first foray.
Of course. Well, I mean, nothing could go wrong there.
Yeah, right. And so I posted a picture on Facebook once of me like with it hooked up with the wires dangling out of the wall. And I'm like, I'm controlling my fireplace. And people are like, are you okay, man? So I put that back together. Like it was a giant thing, and it was never going to work. But that was where I kind of got really interested. I thought I can control this. I can build it myself. I always have that. Yeah. I'm one of those types that just jumps in like I could do this. So I started writing it up in Perl, and I started writing up some design documents and some things. And as I was looking around for different libraries to use, because Perl is just my go-to language. I've been doing that forever. Sure. I stumbled across OpenHab. Like some of the, something led to something, and I found OpenHab. I was like, oh, well, this is kind of cool. Maybe I could use this as the basis. So I started building that, and I ran that for a little while, but just never felt like it clicked with me. for one, it was written in Java, and I've programmed in Java for way too many years to still like Java.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a stumbling block for me. And then the config, I was having a hard time. I think OpenHab 2 came out while I was using it, and it was a big improvement. It had a bunch of auto discovery. It was pretty cool. And then as I was looking for information about how to configure that, everybody on Reddit was like, "Oh, you can do this in Home Assistant, and this in Home Assistant." I'm like, "What is this Home Assistant thing? Maybe I'll take a look." And then people were talking about their scripts that they'd written, and I looked at them like, "Well, that's just a little YAML config. That's not a script. You're not programming." I'm like, "Nah, this isn't anything." so
script kiddies these days, right? Just get some YAML and think they're doing magic, right?
Yeah.
No effort anymore.
I didn't bother to look into what they were actually doing and why it was kind of cool. I just kind of wrote it off and dismissed it. So it took me a while before I finally got in there and looked at it. I was like, I think what finally did it for me was I went to the website and looked at all the integrations that were available. And I think at the time there were something like 700. And I was scrolling through and I was like, wow, this is like everything. It was a lot, like a lot of stuff out of the box. I'm like, okay, this is pretty cool. I got to try that. So that's what ultimately led me to give it a whirl.
Yeah. And I mean, just as of right now, there's 2,377 integrations. Just to put that into perspective.
Yeah. And I remember that number at the time because I gave a presentation. There was in the Salt Lake City area. There's a group that's off and on had like an open source convention called Open West. And in 2018, I gave a presentation. I've been doing presentations on various things there over the years. And I think that was the last one I attended. They've been kind of on hiatus. But I gave one on on Home Assistant, and like it was a packed room. Everybody was pretty excited. I bought a couple little like sewn off minis and was giving those out as like rewards for people answering questions. I've always been of the opinion that as a speaker, if you bribe people in the audience, like your presentation goes better.
It's so true. So true.
Yeah.
So I brought a couple of those and a couple little Arduino Nanos or something and gave them out. And that was part of my presentation was that I wrote in there, it was like 900 and something current integrations in there. And so the numbers just kind of always stuck in my head.
Wow.
But seeing that room full of people is what really it made me realize that like this could be a big thing. Cause like you'd have heard about Internet of Things for years and they're like, oh, you can control your toaster. And like, why would you want to control your toaster? Like, that's just stupid.
Now we're like, toaster. IoT toaster.
Yeah.
That's funny. I mean, that's pretty cool. So, I mean, it's interesting that you got started on the industrial side though, right? Because again, like you said, SCADA is typically used in like plants or like in like facilities like power generation or water, wastewater, or again, oil and gas, that kind of stuff, right? Like, so it's interesting that that's kind of what sparked you to go.
Yeah, well, I saw a lot of similarities between SCADA and Arduino, and obviously the boards are a lot smaller, a lot cheaper too. And my brother-in-law is, I guess my cousin-in-law. Anyway, a friend of mine does industrial system. He does industrial systems, and I was talking to him, and he's like, "Yeah, we do all of our prototyping with Arduino stuff, and then you do the simple stuff there. You can build it quick, and then you move to the bigger stuff because the concepts are pretty similar."
That's cool. I didn't realize it was that similar between like where you prototype on Arduino and you can essentially port it more or less into the SCADA world, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I should say, I took that one class the one time 10 years ago. Yeah. So things have probably changed since then. But yeah, that's my impression is that there's a lot of the concepts are very similar.
That's cool. So have you done any of those, like, I don't want to call it like large scale, because again, we're like, when you think industrial, you're thinking like, okay, like cranes or plant or like belts that transport things. Have you brought any of that either technology or logic or whatever into your home?
I mean, I've brought a few things, I suppose. Like I built my own sprinkler controller with like a dozen relays and hooked it up to the 24 volt AC input and stepped that down to DC to power the board. And that's probably my most complicated. I tried back when I was trying to build everything from scratch. I tried using these little 2.4 gigahertz chips that you could plug into an Arduino, and then you have to define your own data packets and your communication protocols and all this. And I was so excited about that. I mean, I kind of got it working, but it's a lot of overhead.
Yeah.
When I finally found the ESP Home project, I was like, yeah, we'll dump that. We're going straight to ESP Home.
That's fair. So while we're on the topic of sprinklers then, can I ask you about your sprinklers? So are you actively using Home Assistant today to control your sprinklers around the house?
Yes. Yeah. So I have 10 zones and so I have 10 zones and I'm using an ESP32. I started out with an Arduino Mega because it has tons of pins, and I didn't want to bother with breakouts and a whole bunch of stuff. And but I finally switched over to an ESP32 so that I could run ESP Home directly on it. So it controls each of the zones. The Home Assistant controls like when it starts and how long it runs, that sort of thing. But it pushes all that config onto the board. And so it uses like sensors and inputs to set the run times. And then it says, okay, now run. And then the board controls all the running. So if Home Assistant loses connection while the sprinklers are running, it still keeps running as long as it doesn't lose power either.
So just so I understand correctly, so Home Assistant can say, all right, you need to run for 30 minutes. So it will tell the ESP board, all right, run for 30 minutes. And then it will just turn itself off after 30 minutes.
Yeah. And then, so it starts a script on the ESP board and then that just runs. And when it's done, then it stops.
Nice. So are you using, so Home Assistant is, I'm guessing, controlling, all right, it hasn't rained for a few days, so I need you to water today for 30 minutes at this time.
Yeah, so I've tied it into a few things, like the rain level. My neighbor has a rain gauge, like a big fancy weather station, the few $100 ones. So I bought the cheap little RF radios, and I'm borrowing his rain gauge.
Does he know you're borrowing the rain gauge?
I haven't mentioned it to him. I think he'd be okay with it, but I mean, he's the one sending the signals to me, right? Yeah.
So right. I just argue, would you have to pair it, or can you just like sniff the signals anyway?
Yeah, you just sniff it. And in fact, like the software is so clever, you just run it and it finds it. Yeah. It knows, people have written these decoders and temperature sensors. Like when I set it up and I put it outside so the antenna had good signal. I just wanted to see how many I was picking up, and there's like 30 or 40 just in my little neighborhood.
Wow.
That's pretty cool. I should
once I put it inside, then it
got it here.
Yeah, well, once I put it inside, I can't pick up quite as many signals. There's only 3 or 4 that are reliable.
Sure.
I've got one, and it's like one of the little ones, just a temperature and humidity, but he's got one of the big fancy ones. So I use that for the rain amounts, and then I keep track of the temperature, and then so if the temperature has been over a certain level, like it doesn't get too hot here. Like we normally hit about 95 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. We don't normally get over 100, but it kind of looks at if it's above 75 or 80, then it increases the percentage. There's a percentage offset that it uses. So if it's cooler, then it knocks it down so it doesn't have to run quite as long. And then if there's been rain, then it'll delay it. And Home Assistant does all those calculations, pushes them onto the ESP board, and then the ESP board just runs whatever I tell it to run.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So 95 Fahrenheit is about 35 Celsius. So yeah, not too
sounds
hot
right,
there.
I think.
Yeah. Very nice. Okay, cool.
The only thing is that there's been a few times where something was wrong with the controller, and I'm not sure exactly what. I got it to stop doing it, but I don't know exactly how I stopped it. But it would just leave the sprinkler running. It would say that it's done, but the sprinkler would still be running. And then it would move on and turn on the next one. And so eventually all the sprinklers were just dribbling water everywhere and trying to flood the basement.
Oh, God.
There was one time we were out of town and the sprinklers came on, and I happened to notice on the camera that it was that the sprinklers were still running, and it had been like 3 or 4 hours. I'm like, that's too long. So I called one of the neighbors and asked him to go inside. So I was able to open the garage remotely, because that was one of the few integrations I'd done so far. I built a little ESP board that could open and close the garage. And they went in and came downstairs and just shut off the whole house water.
Yeah, might as well at that point. That's the scary part though, right? When you do this kind of stuff and it's like, oh crap, what happens if, right?
On the one hand, it's scary because I tried to automate something and it didn't work. On the other hand, I automated the garage door and it worked great to allow them to get in and shut off the water. So if not for that, then so I guess it depends on which one your spouse is willing to accept as an excuse.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have a fail safe, I guess, right?
So you're powering the solenoids, I'm guessing, or everything through just like a single power jack into the ESP board. Does that ESP board then power all the solenoids, or does each solenoid need its own individual power?
Yeah, so there's only one power supply that is powering the board and is connected through the line, and that's typical of how sprinkler systems go.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're not supposed to run more than one solenoid at a time. I try not to, because then there's not enough water pressure for it anyway. But I have made that mistake of opening up too many relays at once, and I haven't burned it out yet.
So the solenoids, I'm guessing, they require like an active power to remain open, and then if power's cut, they'll close. Is that how they work, or do they actually need just like a signal, enough power to turn it off, and then another power bit to turn it on again? Yeah,
they require constant power to stay open.
Yep. Okay.
And then as soon as the relays, like the I guess it's common. It's not ground because it's AC power. Is connected to each of the relays, and then each of the solenoids has its own control wire that's connected, and then the relays are set up to be normally open. And then once I activate that relay, closes it, sends the 24 volts down to that solenoid, it comes on, and then
So I guess that's also a safety measure in terms of like if the power runs out, like if you lose power in the middle of a water cycle, then the sprinklers will shut off.
Yeah. They're supposed to.
They're supposed to. Yeah.
in theory.
I found that if you don't have the diaphragm tightened just right, then it can't release the pressure. It's kind of a cool like mechanical way that it works, where there's this diaphragm and there's a vacuum on one side, and when it opens, it just lets a little bit of water into the other side, and so then the diaphragm can pop open and it opens the valve. So that's all that really has to do to keep it open. And so if it can't release the pressure on that side so that the water can drain out once the cycle's done, then it will just stay open. And I think that's what was happening to me. I just didn't have it tuned just right.
Interesting. Okay. So note to self, if I ever ended up doing this, just...
I just had to go around and just like, there's just a little set screw, and I just had to twist it just until it turned off, and then call it good.
Nice. Okay. That's kind of cool.
And how have you managed? So you said you got 10 zones. How did you plan out those zones?
Yeah.
Well, that was already done for us because we moved into an existing house.
Nice.
And
okay.
I just just pulled the wires out of the old one and popped them into the new one. That was some of their decisions on where they put sprinklers leave me scratching my head. I have two sprinklers that shoot at each other. Like they're in the same zone and they shoot like one's trying to spray one way and one's trying to spray the other way. Instead of pointing them in the direction they're spraying, they pointed them at each other. So it doesn't get really well watered right there.
That's funny. Fair enough. Well, isn't it supposed to be like, because technically you do like multiple in to cover a single spot, right? Or you do like half circles or something like that, right? So that there's overlap. Yeah, there's supposed to be overlap. In this case, it's excessive.
It's just, like they're literally like 2 inches from each other, like spraying right across each other.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Wow. So what was your first foray into, like, so you started out with Home Assistant. Did you have like a smart technology that you want to go with, like Zigbee, Z-Wave or anything? Or is it all Wi-Fi? Was there anything like that had got like the gateway drug to everything else?
The first thing I guess was Wi-Fi, building stuff on Arduino boards. It's just because that's what was available. But after a little while of messing with that, and there wasn't a whole lot that I could find that was like reliable and good, and was available to control locally. That was Wi-Fi. Yeah. Like that's the hard thing with Wi-Fi is that in a lot of cases, like I tried buying a little camera, I tried buying a few little things, and like you're like it doesn't work offline. Oh well, great. It's no good to me. Send it back. So I eventually tried my hand at Z-Wave, and I was running with the Z-Wave integration in Home Assistant, and it was just flaky. I think everybody
this is the original
knows
one
that,
before Z-Wave JS came out. So it was Open Z-Wave, I think, was the underlying library from
but
it.
It hadn't been updated in quite a while. And
I think so at one stage they even did a fork of it as well that was only Home Assistant specific or something. And
it was kind of just messy. And the guy who was running it, like to his credit, like he just didn't have time. It wasn't because he was being mean or anything. Just like he had a life. Like I get that. So it was kind of hit or miss, but I do have still a fair number of Z-Wave things in, some door sensors. And that was the thing that I wanted the Z-Wave for, was the battery powered things. Cause I didn't want to have to worry about like deep sleep with an Arduino and trying to pack all this stuff in there with a battery into a small form factor. And then, I didn't have a 3D printer at the time. So there's, it would just be this ugly thing hanging off the door. And like, that's not going to fly.
Wires everywhere. And I'm sure.
Right. Yeah. So, so I tried that and it worked all right, but I had a heck of a time. I tried doing a whole house monitor that was Z-Wave, and it had some of the clamps, right? And so
for power energy, I'm guessing.
The induction clamps. And so I opened up the panel, and there's like 200 amps in there, and I'm scared to death, and I'm wrapping the little things around there. And then the dumb thing, just like it wouldn't stay connected. I found there was an option in Z-Wave or in the somewhere in there. Like I found an option where you could force it to poll, but when you would force polling instead of event based, then the whole thing would lock up and then would reboot and stop reporting. Eventually I just gave up on that thing and threw it away. And that was really disappointing. So eventually I did move. I bought a Zigbee stick, and I've got some Zigbee stuff now. And I'd say overall my experience with Zigbee has been better. They're certainly cheaper, the devices. I was always envious of that. I'm like, oh, well, I picked Z-Wave, so I got to stick with Z-Wave. But the Zigbee stuff was always like 20% less or 50% less.
Some of even more. 80%.
Yeah.
Right?
And the Akara stuff, I've got quite a bit of that now. The motion sensors and the door sensors, those work really well.
Yeah, cheap and cheerful. Works well.
I was like, I'm sticking with Z-Wave because it's, all licensed. They've got like their protocols that they have to stick to, whereas Zigbee, it's sort of the Wild West. You don't know if this manufacturer is going to work with this manufacturer. But realistically, right, like Z-Wave can have those issues even as much as you spruik. I've got to conform to this class and this, sort of standard. It's doesn't guarantee anything. So I've
part of it was the Z-Wave is in like the 900 megahertz spectrum. Yes. So I was thinking, okay, well that'll be better. It'll go farther. less
No
interference
Wi-Fi
from
interference.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was one of the major things that kept me away from Zigbee. I finally fell into Zigbee, and maybe I just waited long enough for it, and it matured enough that it seems to work pretty well now. Although these lights I've got in this room are Zigbee, and sometimes they'll just drop off. They'll stop turning on, or they'll stop turning off.
Interesting.
That's annoying.
Do you have a range issue? Maybe like do you?
That's what I thought, but I have put some
Repeaters,
some like outlets in that are relays, and even then, when I've looked at the signal strength, it's not that bad. I mean, it's not like it's that big of a space. My home is, well, I have a little like a Pi Zero, no, not Pi Zero, a Pi W,
Zero W,
yeah, whatever it is. It's buried underneath the thing up, just up above me. I'm in the basement, and so it's not really that far away even. So it shouldn't have trouble. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, because usually I found that when I had devices dropping off, it was that. And one thing I didn't realize too is I mean, from a Zigbee perspective, again, mains powered devices typically act as repeaters, right? So I had a bunch of Zigbee devices around the house, all battery powered, except for on my hood, like on my range hood, the exhaust above the stove, I had two little trad-free bulbs, and those guys, every time I turn it off at nighttime, sometimes my wife would just go manually turn it off from a power perspective. So again, they lose power. And then my devices just freak out because a lot of them were connected to there. And then the Zigbee stick that's in the basement was sometimes a little too far for that, or it just took a minute for it to figure out, hey, I need to go connect there.
Yeah, so, to recalculate the mesh.
Yeah. So temporarily what I had done is I had gotten just, again, more IKEA, like I think they were like $10 Canadian little repeaters. And then eventually I ended up getting sawn-off Zigbee outlets, right? Just for my lights and stuff like that. I got rid of my old Wemos. And and that worked out really well. And now it's solid. So have a look at that. It could be something like that.
It does seem like it's been less. So the ones out, like the carriage lights on the driveway, like right next to the garage, those ones I used to have trouble with a lot. And then I added some more of the outlet plugs in a few spots, and it seems like it's been working better for those. But for some reason, these ones in my office just seem to have trouble. I don't know if it's these particular bulbs or maybe the thing they're in is shielding them. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's what makes this hobby fun, right?
It's the challenges.
That's right. Troubleshooting. It's everyone's favorite task.
Yeah.
That's cool. So are you still running? I know you said you have a couple of Zigbee or Z-Wave things still. So now I guess you're primarily Zigbee, it sounds like, and then splash.
Yeah, new stuff
here and there
is Zigbee. I have a bunch of Wi-Fi stuff too, like Shelly's. I really love. I mean, Wi-Fi is here to stay, right? But
so they say.
But all new stuff, especially battery powered, is going to be Zigbee. The biggest thing is that my thermostat for my furnace and for my fireplace, the one that I had set up with the janky relays and all the wires hanging out, I finally put in a Z-Wave thermostat for that. And so those ones kind of got to stay. I haven't found a really good replacement for those that's not $300. And I don't want to go with like the Nest or any of those. They're not as open. And these ones with the Z-Wave, I can completely control it.
That was my exact same thing. I don't know what brand of thermostat you got. I think I got a Remotech. It's like an oval black box. I don't actually know how to turn my thermostat on through that box. Like the UI of it is so bad, but I got it because it's Z-Wave.
Interesting,
right? Like, I don't know how you control it, to be honest. So if anyone wants to change it,
mine's a radio thermostat, and they have, I think, a Wi-Fi and a Z-Wave version.
Yeah,
so I got the Z-Wave, and the the fireplace one keeps reminding me I need to change my filter. I don't know what it uses to calculate that, but there's no filter on a fireplace.
Yeah.
So I just go by and I push the button, say, okay, I changed your filter. It's like,
it. Yeah.
yeah. So every few months, I just have to.
You can't do that through Home
appease the
Assistant.
little bot.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Not that I've seen. That's a good question. Maybe there is a.
Maybe you could
can
hook
even
up
have
like a
once
relay.
every. Oh, true.
Oh, I could
Like
get a
maybe
little
just-
switch bot
Yeah.
that just pushes it.
Yeah.
Just hits it
Every
time.
morning,
Yeah.
8 a.m. Push it. All right.
Well, I was gonna say every every Home Assistant reboot. Like if there is something if there's a service in Home Assistant that can do it, just every reboot go in and reset my filter for that fireplace, right?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I'll have to look through. You know, in Z-Wave, I'm using Z-Wave to MQTT. I haven't switched over to Z-Wave to JS yet. That's on my list.
Yeah.
Well, they're the same thing underneath.
Yeah, but it's a different Docker container. I don't know
Sure.
what it's going to do. I just haven't bothered with it because it's
Yeah, fair
working. I just
Don't touch it. Yeah.
yeah.
If it ain't broke.
Yeah. I got lots of other things I want to break first. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it does have a list of all the different MQTT topics that it supports and what they do. And so I'll have to go through and look at that.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
give
I'm
that a
sure
shot.
that a random like Z-Wave command, like, you know, like an attribute, right? Like I'm sure you can configure it against, right? I know on my lock there's, you know, set parameter 33 to this and, you know, the block will do this instead, right? So
Yeah,
got to be
exactly.
something similar.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed for you anyway.
Yeah.
So how are you controlling your smart home now? Do you have voice assistants around the home? Do you just drive everything from automations or tablets on the wall?
Tablets. Yeah.
Yeah. So my goal with this was always to make it a smart home and not a remote controlled home. Like a friend of mine was posting on Facebook. He's like, "Oh, we bought some of the Hue lights and we're having fun controlling them with our Amazon." What are we supposed to call
Amazon
it?
Echo?
Our Echo. Amazon
Yeah.
Echo. I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. But like after the novelty wears off, like you don't want to have to be shouting instructions across the room for like 10 different things. Like, okay, turn off the basement lights, turn off the outside lights, turn off the, you know, it just doesn't seem to make sense. I want my house to do things so I don't have to.
Yes, exactly.
So for the most part, it does everything automatically. And that's been my goal. And it's also my wife just has a terribly low tolerance for technology, which I've turned that into a positive of like, if it passes like her criteria, then I know I'm okay.
Yep.
So it's really nice to have her around to sanity check these things. So I don't go off the deep end.
How do you find like kids around the smart home as well? Like, have you had to do any automation specifically for them or any special conditions or use cases that you've found that you've had to sort of account for them in the house?
My kids have been old enough. When I got started, my youngest was probably 8. So old enough that they can actually have a conversation and understand, like, don't mess with this.
Yeah.
So I never had to do anything with little kids. But it is kind of weird. It's like, for example, my youngest, it's probably a good thing, but she tends to forget to take her phone places. Like, so she doesn't always have it on her.
Right.
So on the plus side, she's not really addicted to staring at her screen all the day.
Hey.
So I'll take that as a win.
Yeah.
But on the other side, like she'll go to school, she'll go whatever, and she'll leave her phone at home. And so the house will think there's still somebody there.
Right.
So I've played around with some like Bayesian sensors to figure out like, okay, if the TV's off and the lights are off, and like there's no motion and this and that, like then she's probably not still there. And go ahead and like set the temperature lower or that sort of thing. So that's probably been the biggest hassle. The kids have been pretty excited about it. I offered to install the like LED, the color changing lights on their bed. Like, so one of them I put it underneath the bed. One of them I put it behind the headboard. And so they kind of like light up. And then I built a little Arduino thing to control it or in ESP Home. And I built a little, what are they, like a little a knob so they could change the colors all without having to have a phone. This was before they even had phones.
Yeah.
So there's a little motion sensor in there. So if they like get up out of bed, then the lights turn on and they can change the colors. And they were pretty excited about that. And so they're big into it.
That's awesome.
Nice.
I was going to say, like, is that something that where, they'd be interested in actually like, hey, let's code this, or let's build it and maybe you code it, whatever, like, or is that just not like just a do it for
I had
me?
The same, I had the same thought, and it doesn't extend that far.
Yeah.
I've sat down and asked them for ideas before, and they're happy to give me ideas, but they want me to do it, and not them.
Yeah. But you know what? I was going to say, even idea generation on its own is kind of cool, right? Like it's also nice because they also feel involved, that it's like, hey, this is, I'm also part of the home automation. I also can benefit from it and stuff like that. Right. So it's just really neat.
Well, my son, he sleeps in the basement, and so he's kind of all by himself, and he had a habit of just falling asleep with the light on, and he sleep all night with the light on. And I mean, aside from wasting electricity, he doesn't sleep very well like that. And he gets up, he's so confused. So I was like, what if I put in a smart light here, and then I'll get one of these little Aqara buttons, and we'll tape it to your bed, and then you can just tap it to turn it off. He's like, yeah, Dad, that would be so awesome. So we did that, and he loves it.
That's wicked. Yeah, buttons are. It's so funny how underrated sometimes the simplest things are. Press this button and it'll do whatever you need it to do. Right? It's exactly. Stuff happens, whatever, and.
But then there's the risk that you'll customize it too much. And we had my in-laws over, and in our family room in the basement, the lights are pretty bright. So like when we're watching TV or whatever, we'll just use lamps. And I hooked those up on a little Sonoff plug. And so it's got a button on the Sonoff plug, which I kind of hid in the couch a little bit. So when you're sitting on the couch, you can reach over and push the button on the Sonoff. Really handy to be able to turn the light on and off, because the light's, like way up above your head.
Yeah.
And then I put another little one of the Aqara buttons on the wall over by the hallway, so you could turn it on and off there. And then you could technically control it through the Google that's in there. So there's a bunch of ways to control the lamp, but none of them are really obvious. And so they came downstairs and they're like, how do I turn on this light? I'm like, oh, no, there's not any of those light switches. Oh, no, don't do that. Oh, stop. You're going to break everything.
Yeah.
It's like there's a button hidden right here, or there's a button hidden over there. And like, this is terrible. I'm like, yeah, I can see that.
They make wonderful QA testers, though.
That's true.
Friends, in-laws, parents, all of it. Like it's amazing QA testing. From the perspective of actually driving your things, did you have any tablets even for one-off? Do you use the app? Do you use the web? I know you said you primarily just use automations and that kind of thing. Do you do anything else from like a one-off change kind of thing? Yeah,
I tried a tablet for a while, and I had that on the wall. I tried it with the kiosk mode, whatever that app is called.
The kiosk browser.
Yeah. And I like the concept of it, but the tablet was an old Kindle, and it was just so slow. And then it started having issues where it would like randomly reboot. And like, I even 3D printed a little case for it to mount it on the wall, and it looked pretty cool, but the thing was just flaky. So I ended up getting rid of it. It would overheat if I left the camera. I wanted it to pop up the camera view from the front door if somebody rang the doorbell, right? But if it was doing that, then it overheated, and it didn't work out. So we use the app. I have that on everybody's phone. And so we use that for our presence detection. Although I guess actually the presence is primarily tied to, I have a MikroTik router, and there's an integration for that. And so if they're connected to the Wi-Fi, then their device is home. But it does report some of the other additional sensors like battery percentage and whatever. Because my daughter, not a real big user of her phone, she'll forget to plug it in. So it sends me a reminder like, hey, her phone's only 20%, needs to be plugged in. Which it just seems like a strange thing for a teenager to forget but it is. And then my wife and I will use that to control some of the more advanced things that are in there, like setting the sprinkler run times or manually running. Oh yeah. Going back to the sprinklers, being able to control each zone manually from your phone as you walk around the yard. Like, okay, I'm going to test all these, like in the spring, you got to run them and make sure they're working and see which ones broke over the winter. And it's not having to run all the way back, flip some weird dial and push some weird buttons on the thing.
Yeah.
It's been really nice. Some of those more advanced things. Yeah, we use the app for that.
Bonus for that is put NFC tags on all the zones, so you can just go around and tap each zone around the house, and it will then just power that on for you.
Now that would be kind of cool.
Except
that might be good. So I bought a big pack. I bought a big pack of NFC tags because I thought it would clone some little the Nintendo Switch. One of the little
the Arduino, what are they called? The Meebos or whatever. They've got
the ones that they try to sell you for $20 that it does some, like it gives you some little credit in the game or something. Yeah. But I didn't want to spend any money for those. So I thought, I'll clone some of these. And then I got it and it turned out my phone didn't have NFC in it. So I was like, well, that was kind of a waste. So eventually I did get a phone that does have an NFC tag. So I programmed a few, and I've got one like here in my office where if I set my phone in the cradle, then it keys up the NFC tag and it says he's at work. And so it switches, like my lights won't turn off on me. It turns on, like I have a little Bluetooth thing. It turns out I've got some color changing LEDs in here. It turns those on. And I've used, that's kind of the only one I've used the NFC tag for. I haven't come up with other uses. It seems like one of those things that there's a lot of capabilities there, but I haven't found great uses for it. But the sprinkler 100%. Zones might be nice because then if you walk over to that zone, like it's sometimes hard to remember, is this zone 1 or is this zone 4 or zone 5?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say too, if the NFC tag is in the zone, you might be in a line of fire, right? So
yeah, that might be a problem too.
Yeah.
Well, depending on what stickers you got.
Wear your swim shorts, I guess, but
yeah. I mean, you kind of get wet one way or the other because then the sprinkler's not running and you have to go walk over and fiddle with it and sprays you in the face.
Yeah.
So some other NFC ideas for you then. So I think last weekend I put together a garage door HomeKit controller. So literally like now it integrates with Home Assistant, right? So Home Assistant can tell when the garage door is open, closed, can also open and close it for me. So I don't carry keys around because I've got a smart lock. So I don't have any garage key fob with me at all. So I put a little NFC tag, just stuck it on the brick outside the house, and I just go up with my phone, tap the NFC tag, and it opens the garage door for me through the Home Assistant app. As opposed to going inside.
That could save time over like having to open the app, scroll down, find the tab that it's on. And all right, I like that.
Another one I've got is by the door. I just scan an NFC tag with my phone and it tells the house, all right, they're leaving. So it closes everything down. And then once the door's been closed for 3 minutes, it locks everything down, arms the alarm panel, and everything goes quiet.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm just using straight presence on that if everybody's gone, it just assumes that everything, so it puts it in, it just locks everything.
Yeah. So the reason I don't do that is in-laws or people that aren't monitored by the smart home could be at our house. And we've, had situations where my wife and I have left the house. Maybe my daughter's at home with the grandparent. Everything, they're watching TV, and then all of a sudden Home Assistant goes, oh, no one's home, turn everything off. And then we get a phone call, hey, how do we turn the lights back on, right? So, that's
well, you should have been more involved during the design process.
You should have been there during the requirements gathering.
Exactly, right?
Yes.
No, requirements are always changing, unfortunately.
I have had a couple of instances of that. Like I set it up so the alarm kind of takes care of itself. I don't want to have to alarm a keypad. I know my wife won't do it, and I don't want to do it. Yep. So when everybody's gone, it turns it on. We come home. If nobody's home and the garage door opens, then it disables the alarm. So because I think that's pretty safe. I hope I'm not giving away too many like security secrets on a podcast.
So all we have to do is open the garage. So somebody just open the garage door, because to me that's like the vulnerable part of the house, right? Like garage door, pretty easy to open.
It's easily a repeatable.
Yeah. Well, I figure somebody's probably just going to kick the door in first.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's so funny. We think of security as like, we need to lock this down. Except if you have a window in your door, like the giant thing that I can punch through, right? It's
exactly.
Like, cool.
Or there's the big bay window right next to it, like that you can see in, and it's So mostly I do it so that it'll turn the temperature down if we're away for more than an hour or something. And then we have had some times when like little kids in the neighborhood will come over, and we've had them open the doors and do stuff. And so I just want to know about that. And so if it does that, then it sends a snapshot of the camera to my phone so I can see exactly what's happening right at that moment. Not that I can really do a whole lot about it.
Yeah.
But that's mostly what I have it for.
Makes sense.
And then, so back to the alarm, I guess it kind of just takes care of itself. But if the kids come home and where they can drive now, if they go in the front door, then it doesn't know that somebody's home. And so it'll set the alarm off. And they kind of think it's fun. I think it's fun. So we've left that as a feature. Because we have some LED lights, just like accent lights in the house, in the kitchen and in the living room out there. And I set it up so that if the alarm goes off, the Google speaker will say, she just says alarm, 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 alarm over and over and over forever. And then the lights turn red and blue and start flashing really fast. And what was the other thing I did? And I can't remember. But it's kind of just fun. And then all you have to do is you just tell her to turn the alarm off, and she will. And they have the app on their phone, so they can disable it.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of fun.
Well, not your daughter, because she keeps leaving her phone at home. So,
but her phone will be there at home when she gets there.
True. So she just has to run up or whatever and get it and run around and get it. Yeah.
And then they text me like, "Dad, the alarm went off for me." I'm like, "Oh, nice."
So essentially what I'm hearing, if someone wants to get into your house, they just either open the garage door, or they just when the alarm eventually does go off, they just tell Google to turn it off, and it'll turn off.
Actually, I think I excluded that from Google, so you'd have to do it on the app.
Okay.
But you could get in and just like go, turn the power off to the house. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can.
Exactly, right? Yeah.
Realistically, you can just leave it all going and how long will it be until someone A, notices, and B, does something about it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I get home in 20 minutes, you'll be long gone with my TV, right? Like, it's not really a security thing. Right?
Yeah. Or even neighbors and stuff. I mean, you see all this stuff happening, like, someone, some unfortunate things, right? Somebody gets hit by a car or something like that, and you see people be like, oh, that sucks.
That
and just keep going about their day. And you're like, you're not going to call 911, not going to do any of that.
Yeah. Oh, we did have somebody ran over our mailbox. It's just a simple mailbox on a little post, nothing fancy. Yeah. And I think they did it on purpose because my camera did catch them. It didn't get a good shot of them when it ran over because there's not supposed to be a car right there. So it wasn't really set up to record. Right. But when they came back, there were people and they crossed into the driveway. And so it started recording, and they came over and were taking pictures of the broken mailbox. And so I'm like, I think they did that on purpose, or
maybe they're going to file
at any rate, they didn't come up and knock on the door to say, "Hey, sorry, we ran over your mailbox." So when the camera detected them, the outside lights turned on, and that's when you could see them scatter, and they all ran off.
Nice. You just look at the footage and you just see them being like, okay, little to the right, little to
And on the camera, like you could see them, and you could, like, if you had somebody to compare it to, you could probably tell. Like, it was good enough to compare and say it was this person. But I showed it to some of my neighbors. They're like, I don't know who that is. And I talked to some of the sheriff's deputies, and they had no idea. So it didn't go anywhere. So that's kind of what I feel about with the cameras, is they're not there really much for security. But I like to, kind of that too. And that's the same reason I set up, like, if you push the doorbell, it senses that. I just have a simple doorbell, but I hooked up a little Arduino voltage meter to it to sense if the doorbell's been rung. And then it tells the speaker to play a dog barking sound. We don't have a dog, but it just plays that at full volume.
Yeah.
I figure, well, maybe if somebody came by and was like, well, maybe somebody's home and a dog barks, like, I'll go to the next house.
Yeah.
100%. I've seen Home Alone. You in your initial email to us, you also talk about doing a lot of stuff in your home office, around it being your playground and random messages that come around and things like that. What have you done and what do you want to do?
Yeah. Like before I got really too into it, I played around with, I wanted to I like the lamps in here because it gives you that kind of indirect light. The overhead lights are just way too bright to work with all day. Okay, so I wanted to be able to turn the lamps on when I walked in, but I didn't have all the motion stuff yet or whatever. So I set it up so that if I flicked the light, there was a light sensor that I plugged into an Arduino, and it would sense the light was turning on. And if I flicked it 3 times in a row, then it would say, oh, he's working now. Turn the lights on and go into working mode. And then when I would leave, I'd flick the light 3 times and it would disable it. And that was kind of fun at the time, but not really all that practical. But then later I did figure out a more practical use for it, where we do have rooms where there's an overhead light, but there's also lamps in the room. And if you want to turn the lamp on, instead of walking across the room in the dark to turn the lamp on, if you just flick the light once real fast, then it senses that it happened and it'll turn the lamp on instead. Okay. That's actually turned out to be pretty handy. I've done that in like 3 or 4 rooms. That's one of those hidden things that like the in-laws will never figure out because it's not obvious, but it's very handy for me. I like it.
That light sensor must be like really fast at like pushing an update and then.
Yeah. When you do it on an Arduino, it can read it pretty quickly. I eventually retired that device because it was like on a breadboard splayed out on my desk. I never really finished building anything for it, and it got to be a mess. So I got rid of that. But and then the lights in here, I like to play with those. They change color just like every 2 minutes. It's a different color. I don't know if it shows up on camera or not. But that just, I don't know. That just makes me kind of smile. It makes me happy to see lights changing color. It's just one of those things about me. And then I set up a thing. So it'll play like every time I come into the room and it turns on the lights, it plays a message, and it plays it. I use kind of the GLaDOS from Portal as my inspiration of like an antagonistic robot is in the room. And so when you turn on the light, she's like, hey, turn that back off. Or I didn't think you were ever coming back or these different things. And sometimes she'll be nice, like, oh, hey, welcome back. And so you never quite know what you're going to get. So awesome. Like every so often. And so I write those out just in a text file. Like I've got 80 of them or something, and it picks a random one out of the file. So you get a different thing every time. And then when you leave, you turn the lights off. She says something like good riddance or, hey, see you later.
That's amazing.
I tried to talk my kids into say like if you want to, like you can send me a text message and that'll be the message that it'll play the next time I go to work. I thought that might be kind of fun for them to like program in silly little messages or something, but I could never get them on board with it. So I never set that up. But I did take that theory or that concept of the messages, and I brought that to the main house. So when people come home, if it waits until there's motion in the main room, and then it'll play a welcome home message, and it varies it a little bit. So it's not always welcome home. It's like, hey, good to see you again, or
nice.
It'll say hip hip hooray, you're home, or things like that for each of the kids. And I think they still like it. It's been in years that it's been running, but every time they come home from school, it welcomes them home, and they think it's kind of fun.
That's good.
I think it's fun too.
I'm going to ask the controversial question here. How are you doing your automations? Are you Node-RED, Are you straight YAML? Are you doing something else? Maybe, I don't know, you're doing it in Python directly and
GUI.
doing it that way?
I do have a couple of things running in AppDaemon, but I've never really, I haven't spent too much time in there. Most of it's all in YAML. Of course, that's really what was available when I started. Yep. And, coming from an IT coding background, being able to store those all in Git, I run my own personal Git repo. I don't push those up to GitHub. That just appealed to me, right? And so that's how I've been doing it. I've looked at Node-RED a few times, and it definitely is cool, but I don't know, it just hasn't seemed like it's worth the effort and worth porting everything over. And, I know what I'm doing in the YAML. So it's the old, if it's not broken, why change it?
Yep. Yeah, 100%.
I get that.
What do you think about the UI though? Have you built any automations in the UI and then converted them over to YAML?
I haven't. I have gone in there. I think that definitely is a cool feature, especially for new users, because it does really help you, like walks you through each thing.
I do like the ability to create an automation like through the phone, like if you're sitting on the couch, that'd be cool. Like you can quickly sketch out an automation, save it, and then export it to YAML, and then, make it more intense, right? If you need to, like add extra logic, it would just take ages in the UI to do. I do like that.
That would be cool. Every time I go in there, it keeps yelling at me that it can't save my automations, and I haven't stopped to figure out why, what I need to do to get that working. I probably would do, like you're saying, like playing with things and then port them to the YAML later if I ever got that figured out.
That's cool.
Generally what I do when I have an idea, I use Todoist because there's a nice integration with it. And I'll just throw in my IDs in there and I can put those in on my phone, and then I'll go back later so I don't forget whatever brilliant idea I had. Or I'll get like a couple months down the road, I'll look at it and go, what even is that? I don't know what that even 100%.
means. Coherency.
But I do use Todoist in a few ways to, like, where the Home Assistant will set reminders for me. Like it calculates the runtime of the furnace, and so it keeps track of the filter status, and will say, "Hey, you need to replace your filter."
Nice.
It's cool. I have some humidifiers around the house, and it monitors those. And so when they run out of water, it puts a thing in there. If my vacuum hasn't run for a while, it'll remind me and put that on my list. I like that because like the notifications are nice. Like I like getting the notifications for like when my 3D printer finishes, it sends me a picture and has the actions where I can turn it off or I can leave it on. Like if I'm going to print something else, I say, hey, leave it on, don't power down.
Cool.
Or if I'm done, just, turn it off. And if I don't respond after 10 minutes, it just powers it off anyway. So that's nice for those sort of notifications. But like, hey, you need to run the robot vacuum. That's not something I need to know on my phone right at that moment. So it's nice to have it just like in the background, put it in my to-do list. When I get a chance, I'll look at it and like, oh yeah, okay, I'll go run that.
That's awesome. Any other crazy fun things that you've done or anything like that?
One of the things that I like the most, so I do IT, I get paged out in the middle of the night sometimes. It's been nice. The last few years we've improved our reliability. So once upon a time, it was like every single night. Now it's like once a month. That's a lot better. But, you get up in the middle of the night, you're only half awake. I got to walk all the way across the house. My office here couldn't be farther away from my bedroom. So I had to navigate all the hallways, the stairs, everything without trying to wake up everybody, without trying to blow out my eyes because I'm still half awake, whatever. So I did set up where if it's at night and the right sequence of things starts it. So like if somebody is downstairs and they just start walking around, it's not going to start turning on lights for them. But if my door opens and the hallway sees motion, then it turns on the lights upstairs. And then if there's motion going downstairs, it'll turn on the next set of lights and then turns my office lights on. And it turns them on with like a low brightness. And actually can turn them red as well. And so you get kind of that like, Starship Enterprise is in emergency mode feeling, which I kind of like. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, sure.
And so then, walk into the office and then I can start working. That just kind of helps ease that trouble of, I just got woken up at 5 a.m.
Yeah. Makes it a little easier at least. Yeah.
Doesn't make you a coffee or anything? Haven't got to that level yet.
It doesn't do that. I've thought about that, but I don't know. No. I did have it in my office where it would, like, when I would hit the button and say, "Hey, I'm working now," it would play me like a status of like, "Oh, here's, you have some mail coming today and the temperature is going to be this," and and whatever. But what ended up happening is I would be rushing into work late because I was late for some meeting that I'd forgotten about and overslept for or something. And then I would sit down and I'd put my headset on and then it would start playing. I'm like, no, stop. I'm on the phone. I can't. So I eventually stopped. I can trigger it manually if I want. I set up a little bank of buttons just using a little Arduino. I'm using the Wemos D1 is my device of choice now. And it's just connected to a bunch of pins. And so I can just program those to do whatever I want. And so now if I hit it manually, it'll play, which is still nice.
I always found, like, with my good morning announcement, like, it would tell me the weather for the day, but then I would just forget it 2 seconds later. I'm like, oh, hang on, what did you say what the weather was? So then I end up asking the little lady in the Echo anyway, what's the weather going to be? So... Yeah,
I've definitely noticed that too. And you're like, wait, okay, play that again because I didn't hear it the first time.
I wasn't listening. Yeah.
Oh, I did just this summer finish my permanent LED installation outside. I definitely watched Rob at the Hookup a lot. Yep. Like I watched his videos over and over and over and used his recommendations on a bunch of stuff and wired it all up and had that ready for Halloween and then for Christmas. And that's really fun. Just the other day I was programming the stuff for Valentine's Day to do some like red and whites or whatever. I think it's pretty cool. And I've gotten some compliments on it from my neighbors. But I spent all this time planning it out and specking out the individual components and, was I going to use channels or whatnot? And up there on the ladder installing it. And in the middle of the summer, so it's super hot. I'm on the roof and I get it all done. And I turn it on and it's great. And then like 2 days later, my next door neighbor like has some guys come in and just pop his on in a couple hours and drive off. And I'm like, oh, come on. Yours looks as nice as mine. And I spent way more time on it. And I didn't even get to enjoy those, like the first one in the neighborhood. Cause now he's got his lights on.
So have you got like gradient so you can do like every channel, I guess, can be like a different color, like chasing around and all that? Or have you just got like a single
I did the
color?
individually controlled ones. I went for the 5 volt WS 2812Bs, I think is the one, which I've had problems with power injection. Like some of the lights don't look quite as bright as they should. And I think I didn't use quite a big enough gauge wire. But I just didn't want to risk electrocuting anything. So I went with the 5 volt. It's just easier on everything. So I have it running. I have a couple different zones. We might add another little section. And then I've done a couple little yard displays. Like I cut a snowflake out of some plywood and then just mounted some LEDs on there. And that one looks pretty cool.
Nice.
That's cool. I was able to set up the lights once so that if it was a thunderstorm outside, then it did kind of a lightning effect. Nice. And then once the thunderstorm passed, then it would turn off and just go back to normal. Yeah. And it was really cool. And then somehow I reset the board and it lost all my programming. I had to reinstall WLED and I haven't sat down and reprogrammed it. I was so sad.
No backup.
That's too bad.
No, I didn't have a backup either.
That's the worst.
Yeah.
one other fun thing that I did was, I've got chickens. So I've got a little chicken coop, and I've tried doing some automations for the chickens, like around their food and their water.
Automate their feeding or anything like that.
Yeah. And the thing I've run into the most is putting stuff outside. It's just a terrible environment. I don't recommend it to anyone. And so, especially with chickens, they really make a mess. And so I had this I installed this motor, and it ran this door where it would close off the nesting box so they wouldn't go sleep in the nesting box and muck it up at night. It helped keep the eggs cleaner, which is nice. But then it just like they gummed up everything. So that I had to retire. So right now, all it does is just, it's got a light, it's got a thermostat or like a little temperature sensor. And then it's got a ceramic heater so it can heat up if it gets too cold out there. And sometimes it can get pretty cold here.
Yeah.
And you have to have the light so they'll keep making eggs during the winter.
Have you automated like their water, like through the sprinkler system or anything, like just being able to top up their water for them?
I've thought about that. I think I would I can't have it year round because it would freeze during the winter. So I have these heated watering dishes that they have a little thermostat built into them and kind of takes care of themselves. And I've thought about just going for maybe a simpler route of hooking up a hose with like a toilet float, so it kind of just monitors itself and just would fill up every time it drops down a little bit. And then I wouldn't have to worry about running electronics out there. I don't know if it would in the end be more reliable or not, but
again, in the winter though, how do you deal with, I guess
in the winter I'd have to take it out.
Yeah. Cause that I'm assuming that's the bigger problem, right? Is you having to go out in winter to do all those. I guess if you got to get the eggs anyways, you might as well take a bucket of water with you or whatever and fill it up. But I
think for the winter, there's no real way around it.
Yeah. Cause I know like a few people have done like things with bees as well. Like there's been some smart hives, I think, are on like, Kickstarters and stuff like that. So it's always like fascinating to hear how people are attempting to automate little home farms and chickens and stuff like that. Even like pet feeders, right? Or kitty litters. There's kitty litter integration in Home Assistant now. So
yeah.
I've thought about setting up. We've been considering a dog, and I've thought about setting up like a little game station. Like you come push this button and it'll shoot a tennis ball, and like you push this, it'll like do something else. And I thought that might be kind of fun if I get a dog, make some kind of little thing you can play with.
Yeah. Although I just see you putting all that effort in and then the dog is like, nah, I'm not playing with that.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, that's 100%.
I can see that
happen.
Yeah, rather a human throw ball. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, Corey, thank you so much taking the time talking to us today. We'll leave links to all the stuff in the show notes as well. And really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This was good fun.
Cheers. Thanks very much.